Hello and welcome to another episode of Intune.training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune, the Steve and Adam Show. Hey, I'm Adam.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, Steve, where are you today?
I'm with one of my mates down in Melbourne. Ben here's helping us out as producer for the day, and we've been doing some fun stuff around automating Intune this week. So, yeah, down in Melbourne, having a bit of fun.
Excellent. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the stuff that you guys are creating over there. It sounds like some really nice automation pieces to even cover some of the stuff that we've gone through in our podcast so far.
Oh, definitely. And that's something that we'll get to the point where we'll create another podcast where we share through what we've been working on. It's going to be some fun stuff.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, so today we are going to be looking at conditional access. And so I'm going to be driving, and Steven's going to be the backseat driver. And
as I always do. I do it so well.
Through how to configure conditional access. But before we get started with conditional access, let's talk a little bit about what conditional access is and why it's important.
Yep. So conditional access is all about making sure that your device is compliant when it's accessing the network at a very high level. That's the simple story, right? So this is where we sit there and we can say, look, your device needs to be on Windows 10 with it being compliant inside Intune. So you'll see here we have device assignment issues, and on the dashboard you see there we have compliant grace period not evaluated. That sort of data can be fed into conditional access. And this is where it's based around, say, Windows updates. And it's a really cool story for conditional access is it's the carrot and the stick mentality. Guys, you know what? We're going to give you a notification. You need to restart your computers in this window to install the updates. If you don't, what we're actually going to do is, look, we're just going to remove your access to your emails. And you turn around to an executive or a senior staff member and you say, look, we're not trying to sit here and impact you and impact your team. What we're trying to do is make sure that the environment's secure and safe. And to do that, we're going to have an automated system that just goes, look, your device is not compliant. We can't give you access to corporate data. And in this scenario, email. It's one of the main reasons why I'd be suggesting to do co-management with SCCM, so you can actually have that patch management compliance as well.
So I'm coming from an environment of full on-premises infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, and so we've got perimeter defense up. So we've got a NAC, network access control, and we use that to prevent devices from getting on our network based on certain profiling you do on those workstations. So it sounds to me that this is a way to provide that same concept, that same level, but move it to the device more than, so it doesn't, you don't have a perimeter to set that on because you've got devices that are all over the internet. But so now we can actually apply those policies directly to the device as it's trying to connect to our tenant to perform whatever actions they're trying to do to log in or whatever.
How I would actually reword that one is, Adam, is rather than saying to the device, we're going to apply it to the data, to how you access your data. So we're moving the perimeter from being where you plug into the internet service provider to how you access your corporate data, be it your email system, be it Azure DevOps, be it SharePoint or anything associated that uses your Azure Active Directory identity.
And so then we can use conditional access then to selectively target things that we do and don't want people to access whenever, depending on the compliance level of their device.
Definitely. And we can even extend it beyond that and say, look, you know what? You're more than welcome to access your corporate email on any device. We have no problem with you accessing it on any device, but it has to be via SMTP as an example. So there's no POP access. And we can block those protocols and we can go, sorry, we don't trust it. Or even go to the next level and say, you're more than welcome to access corporate email, but it's only in Outlook because it has the application protection policy rules.
So I really like this because it sounds like it really provides that safety net, that assurance that I think security is always looking for, to say, okay, but my devices are out on the internet, and how do we protect them? But more so, how do we protect our company data? And so this allows us to really tighten down the security to a level that we can feel comfortable about, and still allow these internet connected devices through to our company data.
Definitely, and that's it. It's actually moving where the boundary and the perimeter is, and it's tightening the level of access that you need to actually protect. So you can also set conditional access up on VPNs and things like that as well. So it's about controlling access to your data, controlling access to your environment. And that's the nice thing about that conditional access story. So did we want to start talking through how we'd go through setting it up, Adam?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
Yeah.
Unless the audience has any other questions.
No questions?
All right, here we go.
Sounds good.
All right, so I am logged into I went to portal.azure.com, and I've logged into our Intune tenant, and clicked on Microsoft Intune. And so I'm going to just collapse that sidebar.
Yeah.
And now we are on the conditional access policies node.
Definitely.
Blade.
Yes, blade. The terminology in Azure is blades. It's an interesting terminology. It's where the really super wide monitors become useful.
Yes,
You can scroll all the way across the screen. So what you'll see there is there's 4 policies that are there by default. We didn't create these. They're there. These are the things that Microsoft is starting to sit there and say, you need to have these by default. And the first one is the MFA for admins. It's a great policy, but what you'll find if you go into it is it's for all global admins. So if you're like me and you're using, or you're invited to manage and be an admin in other tenants, you need to be really careful that you don't end up having MFA in multiple tenants on the same account, because it causes a whole heap of confusion in the system. So this is a really good policy, and it's highly recommended that you turn it on. But you also need to look at, is it going to impact anybody in your environment? The one that you'll see down the bottom, and it's just a benign sentence, which is, this policy will also block legacy authentication. This is important. This stops people from going in and doing or using older tools and hacking tools. And we can talk more about that when we get to that policy itself. But straight away, as soon as you turn this on, anything that has the terminology administrator in there is going to have MFA prompted. So they'll have to use MFA to sign into anything. So if we go back to the other policies that are there, Adam, there's also the block legacy authentication, and we'll click on that one and we'll see if we can see any of the settings. So this is where we stop older versions of Office. We stop Thunderbird, as you can see, even legacy Skype for Business. So this is where it hasn't been patched, hasn't been updated. We're going to block the native mail app for Android because it doesn't have the security requirements that we need in there. And that's the same with the iOS mail app. It doesn't have as many security requirements as we need. So on top of that, it also will handle and manage or block protocols that don't have that MFA option. So that's the IMAP, POP, and SMTP, as you can see there. And that's why they're legacy authentication options, is because they're not secure as they could be. So
I've in some of the other things that we've set, we've been able to target policies.
Yep.
And so this, at least before we click save, appears to not have any targeting available for it. Do you get to target individual users that this goes to, or is this just enterprise-wide?
This is enterprise-wide. So this is an all users, all devices policy. So the 4 baseline policies that you have there from Microsoft are in that situation. So these 4 here, they're all categorically positioned so it goes to everybody. What we could also then do is we can create our own policy. So these are baseline policies that Microsoft recommend. You don't need to manage them or maintain them, as they'll maintain them for you. But if we click on the new policy, we'll see that we have the option to give a whole heap of configuration here. So let's give it a name, Adam. So Intune training. And this can be named however you want it.
All right.
And then from there, we can select straight away the users and groups. So this is where you have the association, where you can say all users or select the users and etc. And you can also start sitting there and saying, well, if it's a directory role, I want them to have this access, this as well. So
I really like these pop-ups. Those are
yes,
very helpful.
The tooltips are interesting. So now if we select the users or groups, this is where we can select whether it's individual users or groups, which is a little bit different than what you would see everywhere else in Intune, where it's always around security groups. In this situation, we have the ability to sit there and go, look, we don't trust that Ben guy, so we're going to lock him down.
Oh, I like that. Let's do that. Okay.
And as you can see up the top, there's also the ability to exclude people. So this is where you can exclude all guests and external users. So this comes back to that conversation I was saying around MFA for invited user accounts. So we click OK or done. And now the next one that we're going to select is the cloud actions or cloud apps or actions. So this is where we give access and what it's going to apply to. So we're going to actually go and select the include selected apps on this one for us, Adam.
Yep.
And this is where we can select which applications we want this policy to apply for. So I know Ben likes to write some PowerShell and check commit code in. So right at the top, if you can scroll up, we've got the Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps, yep. And we're going to select that. And we're going to say, cool, it's selected, and this is the application that we're going to control. So don't hit remove down the bottom, just hit select.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's what that's for. All right. Yep, perfect.
And now we are going to put a rule around that for for Ben. So obviously up the top, you can sit there and you can put it whether it's on your cloud app or on the action. So action will do it in a different scenario. So if we just flick it across to actions, this is forcing them to send the security information. So if you just hit the X up the top for us, Adam, because it's one or the other, just discard that. So we just keep our DevOps configuration and we go to conditions. So this is where we're going to say, to get access to Azure DevOps, you need to meet these conditions. So if we select sign in risk and hit yes, and you know what? We're going to make it so if it's a high sign-in risk, we click OK and select. This is where we're saying Microsoft has analyzed how Ben's connecting to that service from his computer, from whichever endpoint, and going, it's sitting at a very high level of security concern. As you can see, it's an AADP2 requirement for that one. If we select device platforms, we can then specify which device type we want to access. So this is where you can say, look, as an organization, we are not going to support Android devices. So we can select the iOS. Well, no, it's actually the opposite way. So we want to say access using all of these. If you don't select it, you're not going to be able to use it. You'd create another policy and saying, if you're connecting via this, you do not have access. And you can still do Windows Phone, which is pretty awesome. Long live Windows Phone. So hit done on that. And then the next one is locations. And this is actually pretty cool. So if we hit yes, and we're going to configure this, And we can specify and create our own trusted locations, but we're going to select locations. And if you hit across, and right now we only have the MFA trusted IPs, but we can go and register our other register additional locations based either on our own IP addresses that we provide or by country based on their IP address at the top level firewall, and say, look, if you're inside Australia or if you're inside the US, it's all good. Outside of that, you're going to get prompted, which is pretty cool. But in this scenario, we only have the MFA trusted location, so let's just tick that to demonstrate, even though we haven't set any of that yet. Hit done, and we hit the client apps, and this is where we can sit there and say, you can only use this sort of authentication and this sort of client. So because Azure DevOps is a web app, let's just select it so it's the browser only. So if we unselect mobile and hit done. So that means when he signs into the browser, he'll get prompted. And device state, we're just going to select yes in all states. You can actually then go further down that at a later date and say, so long as it's registered and enrolled. So we hit done. And now here's the access control, what they can access when we do this. So if we select that, so when they're trying to access it, we can say, look, you are going to have MFA, your device has to be compliant, it has to be an approved client app, and we can even go down to it requires an application protection policy. So that's in the Windows world, the Windows information protection policies, which is pretty crazy, right? The amount of configuration you have here. The important thing to note down the bottom, and it's really important, don't lock yourself out of the device. So this is where the what if button, which we'll show you in a minute, will give you more information about what will happen if you do this. But also one of the scenarios or one of the things you should never do is target any of these policies to all users. It should always be to a security group that is explicitly excluding your break glass accounts that have admin access, that have a password that's stored somewhere secure, that is not a day-to-day account. Because as soon as you start doing that sort of thing, it gives you just a backup to get back in as required if you kill yourself. Otherwise, you're going to have to sit on a support call with Microsoft that could take a day for your whole environment to be down. So pretty important.
Very good word of caution there. This is, especially, it's new and different, and I can see how you could very easily get in here and set a policy and assign it to the wrong place and nuke your environment. Yep. Especially with those baselines. I mean, knowing that those baselines are enterprise-wide, that's kind of important to know about.
Definitely. And the other thing is that they're cumulative policies. So if you assign one here and one here, you're going and they'll just combine together. So it's pretty important to make sure that you've spent the time to do the what if, make sure it all works. So if we hit your session for us, and this is where we can start putting some rules around where you're going to access. So you can handle that scenario with the sign-in frequency. So you can say, well, if you sign in here often, then it's automatically going to be a device, or you're going to have to respond and reconditional access after this amount of time. And it's things like that, which are pretty cool. Persistent sessions and yeah.
Well, so I mean, but I like this because this allows you to keep to make it so that your users don't have to constantly, every single time they go to open up the app, or every time they go to the thing, you could potentially make it a little bit nicer on them, where no, we've recognized where you're at, we know your device, we know your username, whatever, and we won't keep bugging you to keep logging in for things.
Yep. So Ben, who is one of our employees sitting in Melbourne, He works outside of our network, and he constantly gets MFA because he's outside our network. It's not a great experience, and it's something that we're working on improving. And this is where these sorts of frequency of sign-in and registering IP subnets and things like that are really important, because then it gives you that ability to sit there and go, yep, we're not going to bug you every day. There's nothing worse than having 200 people at a site sitting there and having to MFA every day or every time they sign into an application because their external IP address or internal IP address ranges haven't been registered with as a trusted MFA address.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, I think this definitely leads you towards, very careful planning on understanding where your workforce is and what type of environment they're going to be connecting in from, so that you can then properly target this stuff right out of the gate, so that you're not, especially if you're transitioning to the cloud, if you're going from traditional into Intune, you would encounter this type of scenario where say, okay, we're going to roll out this, we're going to move all of this stuff to Intune, and now your folks are having difficulty accessing it, and you could head that off a little bit by a little bit more careful planning, it seems.
Definitely, and this is also where when it comes to the users and groups assignment, it's really important to run that pilot. Make sure you sit there and test it and test it and test it, and roll it out one by one or by division, or you don't want to sit there and just go, tomorrow I'm turning it on for my whole organization, because the number of phone calls you're going to have and the number of executive staff that are going to bang on your door and go, I can't access my corporate data, is going to be a lot.
Yeah. Well, as a side note on that, not particularly with conditional access, but earlier today I was looking on a forum and someone asked the question about Intune and auto enrollment, and apparently they turned on auto enrollment for their users, and their users' home devices were then becoming enrolled in their company tenant, and they were applying company policies to these users' home devices, and they were trying to figure out how to stop that.
Yep, and that's where device enrollment should be treated very cautiously, because there's a lot of security related to what we're doing. And this is where that whole corporate personal configuration is really important as well. So this is where you can define a device as personal or define a device as corporate and sit there and control that. So yeah, and that's the bulk of it, is making sure that you've correctly configured devices and correctly enrolled devices, because there's nothing worse than managing or taking over your staff's personal devices, and that can be as simple as an Exchange Active Sync client being registered into your Intune tenant and you being locked, or them being locked out because of it.
Yeah, and I think it also undermines a lot of the trust that I know in my organization. Our IT department has really fought hard to build the trust with our users, to say, look, we respect you, we respect your privacy, we respect the things that we're not going to be snooping on you and spying on you as you do your work. We trust you as an employee, and all it takes is one slip like this to lock their personal machines down and lose that trust. And so I think it's just, not to keep beating this horse. Pay attention to what you're doing before you enable this and upset a lot of people.
Yep. So if we hit create on that, Adam, we're not going to enable. Oh, may as well enable the policy. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not.
And so before we go on it, so just to recap, so we set up the assignment. We told it what app and what conditions needed to be configured.
Yep.
And with the intention to grant access. So we could have flipped it around and said, if you do the opposite and said, okay, we want to deny access if you have these other things. So either way, we want to make sure that we're flipping it around the right way when we're configuring these settings.
We're making sure the conditions that we want your device and how you're going to access the corporate data are met, is the simple answer. So if we hit create on that, Adam, we should now be able to see man policies. Okay. And one day we will get this right. So just hit any device on that one, Adam. And just done. And create. Let's see.
You want to just try Windows platform?
No, I think it's because we're doing, so hit done on that one. Done again under, hit create, but I think it will fail. Yeah, go to grant. No. Yes, so the require app protection policy preview. Unselect that one and hit select and create. It's not the app, because the app is a web-based app. Device platforms is all correct. Yep, that should be fine. Sign in risk.
Where are we at?
Top of the
Sorry. Yeah.
that should be fine. If you hover over the informational, yeah, that should be fine. And device state, yeah, all states.
I can try to take out the platforms and see if that does anything.
Yep, let's do that.
We're doing it live every time.
Yep. All right, let's try session then.
Give us a nice hover there.
I'm guessing it might be sign-in frequency. If you unselect that, select. Yeah, nope. Ooh,
That's a new one.
yeah. Can we scroll down on the? No, not there. Must be sessions. System browsing maybe. We have selected cloud app.
We have to select all cloud apps.
Okay, we'll unselect that and let's try, yeah, that one. And so 20 and days.
It doesn't like us. Is there an app? Can we do this?
Yeah, let's try that. Wow.
We just can't ever win.
All right, well, let's not spend all day on it. And we'll move on. We'll just set the sign-in risk to no. Oh yeah, cool.
Oh, that, yeah, sorry, I just don't configure it. Yeah.
All right. Let's just close out of this, Adam. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do a what if.
Okay.
So, yep. So what if's where we start sitting there and picking out a user, and we'll pick on Ben again. And this is where we're going to say go to cloud app. We'll just do any app.
Okay. Well,
okay. Maybe we need to select an app. Yeah, we'll go that one. Hit done. Just select a region, a country. So we'll go Australia.
it's alphabetical, I know.
It is. And Australia's right at the top. Well, almost. No.
AU.
Just
there
after.
we go. Hey, how about that? Oh, sorry, I clicked.
That's okay.
Off of that. Okay.
And then we can just select our device platform. And this is where we can say, yep, browser. And I think it's going to fail. So if you hit what if, yeah. So let me just get the public IP address here. Nothing like live TV.
I think it adds a certain flair to our presentations here.
That's right.
We did it the right way every time. People would never have bugs.
So for the IP address, Adam, can we put 121.208.151.56? And what if? And there's no policies. And if we click on what policies that will not apply, and you can, if we go and turn one of these on, you'll start seeing some more information around that. So let's turn on the block legacy authentication, Adam, because we're not using any of those legacy auth systems. And if we now do a what if, same scenario, but let's, yeah.
Let's leave that at any cloud app and see if that works.
So
IP address 121.208.
151.
1.56.
Yep, that's correct. And Australia. And device platform is Windows. Exchange unsupported platforms, so third from the bottom. Second from the bottom, yep. And it's marked as compliant. And it's a no risk. And we go, what if? Yeah. Okay. Policy is not enabled, but it is.
But it is. Oh, look at this. You can do it right here.
Nice. So hit save. Yeah. And now if we go policies that will apply, and there you go. So you can see that policy.
That is fancy.
And you should be able to click on that and see more information about it, I believe.
I really like that.
Yep. So what is really important, make sure you run it if you're going to do any sort of testing and configuration, because these things are dangerous if they're misconfigured, is the important thing to note.
Yeah, and I would say that this also should give you some pause on who you allow to have access to set your conditional access policies in your environment. Because even if you say, oh, this guy's my Intune administrator, I'll just let him do Intune things because that's just autopilot. And no, this is keys to the kingdom right here.
That's right. Probably the other thing that we should talk about here is, Adam, is there's two other things that we should talk about in here, is named locations. So this is where you can set up your corporate offices and you can sit there and say, it's going to be this IP range and I'm going to trust it. Or you can go and select countries that you don't trust. So as an example, countries that you don't trust, based on experience or whatever we want to do, is we're going to do New Zealand. I was going to say North Korea, Afghanistan, Syria.
Yeah, you know,
I'm happy with New Zealand.
closer to home.
That's right. Can't trust those hippies.
Yeah.
And we can then start building the story around that and what we're going to do and say you've got access or not. The other one that I wanted to talk through here was if
Sorry, but before we go back, so I know we jumped right to countries, but you can also do the IP range.
Oh,
so
definitely.
Just plug in all of your stuff, which would be probably the more easy way to do it. And look, upload and download buttons.
Yes, that's right.
So get a download, an example text, and then you can just dump this right out of your environment and upload it directly instead of making your network guy sit here and manually type all this stuff in.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly it. So the other one that I was wanting to talk about in here, if we go back to conditional access, there's the terms of use on the left-hand side. So terms of use, this is, I know we've always had that, you hit Control-Alt-Delete, click OK because you're accepting the terms of use. And oh yeah, you've accepted the terms of use. So I've worked at a lot of organizations and I've probably never read those terms of use. I've sat there and I've put them into policies. I've configured those policies.
Exactly.
I think I've even drafted some of those policies, but I've never really read them, and they're not really sitting there and not useful because there's no button that says I don't agree. Whereas what we have with the terms of use for conditional access is we can actually say, look, if you don't accept conditional access, if you don't accept the terms of use, you don't get access to corporate data. Yeah,
that's neat. I mean, you could even add like auto pink slipping out of that, right?
Yep. Exactly. It sounds silly, but it's important, and you can start having, right, well, you have to actually expand the terms of use. So you've read them through. It's like, well, for most of us admins, it's like the Apple policy. Oh, you have to read all the way to the end. Control End. There you go. I've read it. But this is where these sorts of things become really important, and we can start putting in there and saying, look, every device you sign into, you're going to have to consent that you understand the terms of use for accessing corporate data. And that's what conditional access is all about, is saying we are putting conditions on how you access corporate data. And this is just verbalizing it. Wow.
Well, and from a, not to get, too legally on this, but I mean, this is a legally binding, component here that helps both the employee and their employer establish boundaries on who can access what, and on both ends. So can your company access your data off of your home computer? Can you access certain company data from your home computer? And I think that's important because that establishes that trust relationship of knowing where your boundaries are and knowing what's acceptable and what's not. Whether you choose to read it or not is a whole different thing. I mean, ultimately, if I'm trying to do work for my company, yeah, I'm probably just going to click OK. But if I'm doing work for my company on my home computer, I may want to know, just like if I sign up for a new service for a company like Apple, like you just said, if I sign up for a new service, well, they're going to give me terms of service there as well. And how many times do we not read that and we find out later, oh my goodness, that they just sold all my data? There was that one that came out recently with Face app or something where it was making you look old or something, and turns out, oh, Russia was running that one, and or I don't know. But the terms of service said we can take your picture and use it forever for anything. And that's people just, nobody reads it and they know that. And so the company took advantage of that, of people's trust or lack of care, I guess, and exploited that. And then everybody was up in arms about a thing that if they would have just read, they just wouldn't have clicked OK to. So same deal here. If you don't read it, that's on you. But the company should be giving you the opportunity to understand where that boundary is.
Exactly, and that's what this is all about, and making sure that the correct level of trust is between the organization and staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that really covers off the conditional access story there, Adam. There's VPN connectivity. So I forgot about this one. This one's pretty cool. You can link this with your Microsoft or Microsoft always on VPN. You can, whether it's the on-prem solution or Azure Azure solution, as an always-on scenario, you can make it so you need to have conditional access to access the VPN solution, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know about you.
Whoa! So you can you can, before you get connected to your company network, you can profile the machine to determine whether you even allow it to get on the VPN.
That's right. So
I like that.
Basically, MPS or not MPS, NAC, network access control for the VPN solution, natively connected at the authentication layer instead of at the network layer.
So let me ask a different question then. So, what do I need a VPN for if all of my resources and everything are in the cloud? What are the scenarios where I would want to use this?
Yep, and that's a very fair question. So, where I see this being used is for traditional shops that are in that transitional phase, that are moving from being that on-prem traditional IT with a fully joined domain, everything managed on the domain. You got the file servers, you've got the traditional line of business applications, all requiring that network access and being inside the corporate boundaries. That's where you still need those VPN scenarios. And it's a transitional scenario because give it, say, 5 years, and if you've moved in a ideal world, you've refactored everything and you've set everything up so it's going to use cloud-based scenarios. It's going to use web front ends. It's going to have those sorts of security functions built in, and you don't need to worry about using a VPN scenario. But today, for most organizations, the sheer fact is, look, there is a good chance if you've got a client server application, you're still going to need to have a VPN scenario.
Well, I like that explanation. I mean, that's what I assumed it was for, but I felt like there's somebody out there watching this that wanted to know that answer. So that's good.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a completely fair question. The other thing that you can actually do as well is it's not just based on the Microsoft applications in here as well, right? So we chose Azure DevOps, but that's actually where the authentication is being added into Azure Active Directory. We can add our own custom applications. If you've got a third party that's using AAD applications to authenticate, you can put conditional access on that as well.
And is that where we would basically register that in our Azure AD tenant as an app, enterprise application, and then we would then be able to see it as an application to assign a conditional access policy to?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's exactly it, and that's the really good thing about it. So the other thing to note, even though it's not something that we're recommending, you also have the ability to use the traditional or the classic policies. This is the V1 policies, V1 configurations. They've been deprecated now, and you can only, if you've previously had them set up, you'll see them here, but otherwise you're not going to be able to create any new classic policies.
And by classic, we mean Intune classic, correct?
Not necessarily. So conditional access, the platform that we're running on, is V2 version of that conditional access platform.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is the continuous improvement platform that Microsoft's doing around the cloud platform.
Excellent. And I, as we've gone through this, I like the fact that we've continually seen preview items in here, and I mean, we've continued to see this across the Microsoft stack, where we're seeing preview things come out. And right now, I'm working on the desktop analytics preview for integrating with Config Manager to do device readiness for in-place upgrades, feature updates, and things. And it's preview though. Yes. And what's great is they want our feedback. And 100%. So they want us. They want, the more people they get playing with these things and implementing them and testing them out, the more telemetry data they're going to be able to gather on the back end, because they're collecting data about usage and errors that are happening anyway. But then anything that we encounter and we have issues with, we can contact support, and we can get them to look at this and fix it before it goes out into full production.
And the important thing to mention there, Adam, is, look, if you do run into an issue, guys, make sure you tell somebody, tell Microsoft. They might not know that that bug exists, and they may go, oh, we'll fix that straight away because there's going to be a whole heap of people impacted by it. Alternatively, they might go, look, it's just not that mission critical. And yeah, the submit feedback, that's in pretty much every application from Microsoft now.
And this is it. Just send them a frown, tell them what you did, what happened, and if they want more information, they will contact you and work with you to fix it. And in my experience, the times I've done that, I've gotten great support, and I'm not even getting charged for that support, because typically it's, if it's in preview, I don't know the official ruling on it, but sure feels like that's probably going to be a free call.
Yeah, but it's also best effort for preview, because the support team might not know about it. But yeah, highly recommend, if you're going to look at anything, make sure you log any problems you come across, because Microsoft definitely want to know about these things so they can improve it for everybody.
Yep, if you see something, say something. That kind of applies to lots of things in life, but
exactly,
works here as well.
Yes. Cool. Well, I think that covers off conditional access pretty well. Adam, what do you think?
Absolutely. I've learned some really cool things today, and I'm really excited to begin down this path of locking some folks out and moving away from our NAC solution. Well, it's probably going to happen at least once. I'll just be honest here.
Definitely.
But I can just go create a new tenant or something. It's fine.
Yes. Make sure you set up a break glass account is what I highly recommend.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Not your personal account, not your production account. It needs to be an account that's just sitting there as a global admin with no licenses assigned that can get back into the tenant and turn off any settings that you've configured.
We actually had a conversation about this at work this past week, actually, where we've got official documentation around how the break glass account is managed, what it can and can't be used for, who does and doesn't have access to it. Because that's one of the, that's like giving somebody the briefcase with the launch codes. Be very, very careful of that. That's exactly, you're going to break the glass to get to that account. So be careful with that, and consider securing that in officially, writing a document or coming to some agreement with the folks that are in charge of that account to make sure that it's not being abused.
100%.
So, anyway, I think this was a great session. I'm hoping that other folks find it useful as well. Thanks for taking some time out of your coding session there in Melbourne, and see you next Tuesday.
Yes, you'll see me next Tuesday. And a big thanks to Ben, who's been our producer today, who's helped us out getting all of this up and running and provide us the bandwidth.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
You're welcome. I'm blurred.
Cool. I think that's us.
All right. We'll see you later, man.
See you, mate.